Assalamu alaikum YouTube, this is Mirza. In today's video I wanted to look at chapter 12 which is also called Surah Yusuf because I was blessed with some more insights into this chapter and I wanted to share it with you guys. I think I've read this chapter maybe 10, 15 times over the course of a few years, and really not have picked up what the chapter is talking about. Because at one point you do have the story of Yusuf, which is told in its entirety in this chapter, which is something rare in the Quran. Usually, the Quran puts just mentions in passing or has certain passages that are related to prophetic figures, but in the case of Surah Yusuf, it's Yusuf's whole story that's mentioned. And I wanted to kind of go over this translation. This is from the work of Brother Gerrans, the Quran, a complete revelation, which can be downloaded for free from Qur'an.com. I wanted to go over this translation and kind of pick it apart at certain points, which I think have hold insights for uh, many believers at this day and age. So let's begin. So this is chapter 12. In the name of God, the Almighty, the Merciful. Alif Lam Ra. Those are the proofs of the clear law. We sent it down as an Arabic recitation, that you might use reason. We narrate to thee the best of narratives in what we instruct thee of this Qur'an, and thou wast before it among those unaware. Now, when the Quran is saying we narrate to thee, obviously the reference is in first person singular, and for me, it's the person who's reading the Quran or Muhammad himself. When Yusuf said to his father, O my father, I saw 11 stars, and the sun, and the moon, I saw them submitting to me. Now, this part is important because this is basically the conclusion of the story, and we'll get to that when we get to that. But I wanted to bring your attention to what he said specifically. He said, "O my father, I saw 11 stars, and the sun and the moon. I saw them submitting to me." So just keep that in mind. That this is he saw a dream that there were 11 stars, the sun and the moon, and they were all submitting to him. He said, O my son, tell thou not thy dream to thy brethren, lest they plan a plan against thee. The shaitan is to man an open enemy. Now, Yaqub's advice to his son is to not share this dream with his brothers, uh, lest they plan a plan against him. And then he says the shaitan is to man an open enemy. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is that this whole story is about God's plan versus shaitan's plan. And we'll see how the shaitan, in pretty much across the whole narration, does things to frustrate the plan of God, but God's plan prevails. So then we continue with verse 6. And thus will thy Lord choose thee and teach thee the interpretation of events, and complete his favor upon thee and upon the house of Yaqub, as he completed upon the fathers before, Ibrahim and Ishaq. Thy Lord is knowing, wise. In Yusuf and his brethren are proofs for those who ask. Now this is a very telling statement. It's saying in Yusuf and his brethren are proofs for those who ask. Lisailin, which lisailin also means someone who seeks, is questioning. So we will see how there are proofs in this for those who are actually sincerely looking. When they said, Yusuf and his brother are dearer to our father than are we, when we are a group, our father is in obvious error. Kill Yusuf or banish him to a land. The countenance of your father will pass to you, and be after it a righteous people. Now, I see a lot of people doing this, and I was guilty of this myself. I used to sin and then say, okay, I'll ask God for forgiveness and become righteous. These brethren of his, there's something to consider, because their actions actually speak volumes about who they are, and you can relate their actions to what's going on with many people that you see around the world. Okay, said one speaker among them, kill not Yusuf, but cast him into the depth of the well. Some caravan will find him if you must act. They said, O our father, what is with thee? Thou dost not trust us with Yusuf, when we are sincere counselors to him. And if you remember, the sincere counselor, that's a theme that runs across the narrative of Adam, where Shaitan tells him that he's a sincere counselor to him. Send thou him with us on the morrow, that he might run and play, and we will keep him safe. He said, It saddens me that you should take him, and I fear lest the wolf eat him when you are unmindful of him. They said, If the wolf eat him when we are a group, then will we be the losers. Then when they took him and agreed to place him in the depth of the well, and we instructed him, thou wilt inform them of his deed of theirs when they perceive not. Now, this sort of aside, which Brother Gerrans has correctly put in parenthesis, God is instructing Yusuf that he will inform them of what they did when they are not perceiving. And we will see that all these statements come to pass. Okay, continuing on verse 16. And went to their fathers in the evening weeping. They said, O our father, we went to run races and left Yusuf with our goods, and the wolf ate him. And thou wouldst not be one who believes us, though we speak the truth. And they came with false blood on his shirt. He said, the truth is, your souls have enticed you into a matter, then comely patience, and God is the one whose aid is sought against what you describe. As you can see, he's a man of patience. He asked God for help. And also, it's telling that he says, the truth is, your souls have enticed you to a matter, because he suspected that they are the ones who were responsible for the disappearance of Yusuf. And we will see this statement being repeated again later down the line. Okay, continuing on verse 19. And there came a caravan, and they sent their water drawer, and he let down his pail. He said, O glad tidings, here is a lad. And they hid him as merchandise, and God knows what they did. And they sold him for a low price, a few dirhams, and they set no store by him. And said he who brought him from Misr to his wife, be thou generous in his dwelling. It may be that he will benefit us, or we will take him as a son. And thus did we establish Yusuf in the land, and that we might teach him the interpretation of events. And God prevails over his affair, but most men understand not. Now this statement, وَكَذَلِكَ, and thus, you will see this being repeated across this chapter. And again, Brother Gerrans' insights are very much appreciated, where he says that these sort of markers, these pentextual markers, are spread across all over the Quran, and they're basically referencing each other. So we're gonna look for this word وَكَذَلِكَ and thus in the rest of this narrative to see what insights we can get. But here I wanted to bring your attention to this fact that it says, and thus did we establish Yusuf in the land, and that we might teach him the interpretation of events. Now, if you backtrack and you actually look at what happened with Yusuf, you can see that it's actually the evil deeds of his brothers, and the evil deed of the people who took him from the well and sold him. Those were the reasons that he ended up where he did. So you can see that the shaitan is working his plan, and he's frustrating God's plan, because God's plan was that he would be that the conclusion where Yusuf's brethren and his mother and father will submit to him. That is the plan of God, and the shaitan is frustrating him in that plan, because Yaqub tells his son not to tell his brethren about the event, about the dream, because he was afraid that they might take action against him. But they decided to take action against him regardless. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the shaitan is doing his best to thwart the plan of God. But as you can see, it says God prevails over his affair, but most men understand not. So to continue, verse 22. And when he reached maturity, we gave him judgment and knowledge, and thus reward we the doers of good. And she in whose household he was sought to lure him away from his soul. And she closed the doors and said, Come thou hither. He said, I seek refuge in God. He is my Lord, who made good my dwelling. The wrongdoers do not succeed. And she desired him, and he desired her, were it not that he saw the evidence of his Lord, thus that we might turn away from him evil and sexual immorality. He was among our pure-hearted servants. So again, we see the pentextual marker come up, kadalika, thus. Now, again, this is the shaitan's doing, that this woman is trying to seduce him. And they raced to the door, and she tore his shirt from behind, and they met her master at the door. She said, What is the reward of him who wishes evil on thy household, save that he be imprisoned, or a painful punishment? Said he, She it was who sought to lure me away from my soul, and there bore witness a witness of her household. If his shirt be torn from the front, She has spoken the truth, and he is a liar. And if his shirt be torn from behind, she has lied, and he is of those who speak the truth. And when he saw his shirt torn from behind, he said, This is the plan of you women. Your plan is tremendous. Yusuf, disregard thou this, and a wife ask thou forgiveness for thy transgression. Thou art among those in error. And woman in the town said, The wife of the governor is seeking to lure her houseboy away from his soul. He has enslaved her to love. We see her in clear error. And when she heard of their scheming, she sent to them and prepared for them a feasting couch, and gave to every one of them a knife, and said, Come thou out to them. And when they saw him, they exalted him and cut their hands, and said, God forbid, this is no mortal, this is only a noble angel. She said, This is he for whom you censured me, and I sought to lure him away from his soul, and he proved patient. But if he do not what I command him, he will be imprisoned, and be of those brought low. He said, My Lord, prison is preferable to me than that to which they invite me, and save thou divert their plan from me, I will incline to them and be among the ignorant. And his Lord responded to him and diverted their plan from him. He is the hearing, the knowing. And this is God's response. He ended up in jail. Then it became clear to them after that they had seen the proofs that they should imprison him for a time. So this is basically the narrative at the point where he ends up in jail. And you can see that he's been steadfast and patient and always taken the right path. He has stayed away from sin altogether. And he's just been basically one misfortune after the other has befallen him, but it seems that he is still constant and patient. Okay, to pick up here, chapter, this is verse 36. And two young men entered the prison with him. One of them said, I saw that I was pressing wine, and the other said, I saw that I was carrying upon my head bread, whereof the birds were eating. Inform thou us of the interpretation. We see thou art among the doers of good. Said he, There will not come to you food wherewith you are provided, save that I will inform you of its interpretation before it comes to you. That is of what my Lord has taught me. I left the creed of people who believe not in God and are deniers of the hereafter, and followed the creed of my fathers, Ibrahim and Ishaq and Yaqub. It is not for us to ascribe a partnership to God in anything. That is of the bounty of God upon us and upon mankind, but most men are not grateful. Now, it's interesting that he says, I left the creed of people who believe not in God. When, if we go back in verse 31, they said, God forbid, this is no mortal, this is only a noble angel. So obviously they did believe in God, but that was only just a sort of a play with words. They did not really believe in God. And obviously, being a man of God himself, Yusuf realized that these were the al-kafirun, which Brother Gerrans has correctly defined as the those who spurn guidance while claiming virtue. Anyway, to continue. Verse 39. O my two prison companions, are diverse lords better, or God, the one, the omnipotent? You serve besides him only names which you have named, you and your fathers. God sent not down any warrant for them. Judgment is only for God. He commanded that you serve not save him. That is the right doctrine, but most men know not. O my two prison companions, as for one of you, he will pour for his Lord wine, and as for the other, he will be put to death upon a stake, so that the birds will eat from his head. Concluded is the matter about which you sought opinion. Okay, verse 42. And he said to him, he thought would be delivered of the two, Remember thou me before thy Lord. But the shaitan caused him to forget the remembrance of his Lord, and he stayed in prison some years. Now, wanted to just bring your attention to this phrase that the shaitan caused him to forget the remembrance. Basically, he told this person that was going to be saved, mention me in front of your Lord, and he forgot, and the shaitan made him forget. So again, the shaitan is frustrating the plan of God here. Okay, to continue. And the king said, I saw 7 fat cows, which 7 lean were eating, and 7 green ears of corn, and the same again dry. O eminent ones, advise me concerning my dream, if you can interpret dreams. They said, Confused dreams. And we are not learned in the interpretation of dreams. And said he who was delivered of the two and remembered after a life of ease, I will inform you of the interpretation, send thou me. Yusuf, O thou man of truth, advise thou us on the 7 fat cows which 7 lean were eating, and 7 green ears of corn, and the same again dry, that I might return to the people, that they might know. He said, You will sow 7 years as usual. That you have reaped, leave in its ear, save a little. Of that will you eat. Then will come after that 7 hard. They will eat what you have provided for them, save a little of what you will keep guarded. Then after that will come a year, wherein men will be given abundant rain, and wherein they will press. Now, what's interesting to me is that if I was in place of Yusuf, the first thing I would ask this guy is, "Hey, remember me? You forgot about me. I told you that you should mention me to your king, and you just kind of left me here to rot." But that's not what Yusuf did. Okay, verse 50. And the king said, Bring him to me. And when the messenger came to him, he said, Return thou to thy lord, and ask him what is the state of the women who cut their hands. My lord knows of their plan. And I mentioned in a previous video that it's also worth noticing how the interplay of the Lord happens throughout this narrative, because Yusuf, in all the instances when he says my Lord, he's referring to God, whereas the other people, when they're referring to Lord, they're actually referring to their king. Okay, to continue. Said he, what was the case of you women when you sought to lure Yusuf away from his soul? They said, God forbid, we know not of any evil against him, said the wife of the governor. Now the truth is out. I sought to lure him away from his soul, and he speaks the truth. That is so he might know that I have not betrayed him unseen, and God guides not the plan of the betrayers. I do not absolve myself, the soul commands to evil, save that my Lord have mercy. My Lord is forgiving, merciful. Verse 54. And the king said, Bring him to me, that I might attach him to my person. And when he had talked with him, he said, Thou art this day before us established in rank and trustworthy. Said he, Set thou me over the treasuries of thy land. I am a knowledgeable custodian. And thus we established Yusuf in the land over whatever he wished. We reach with our mercy whom he will, and we waste not the reward of the doers of good. So the same motif here, وَكَذَلِكَ, and thus we established Yusuf. And if we backtrack again, we see how the things played out. The Aziz's wife, the governor's wife, was trying to seduce him. That was an act of shaitan. He resisted. He got thrown in prison, and he was in prison for a while. And then the king had a dream, and then he sought interpretation, and then from there he ended up being one established in rank and trustworthy. Okay, to continue, verse 57. And the reward of the hereafter is better for those who heed warning and are in prudent fear. And the brethren of Yusuf came and entered upon him, and he recognized them, but they recognized him not. Obviously, he had grown, so probably changed. And when he had furnished them with their provision, he said, Bring me your brother from your father. See you not that I give full measure, and that I am of the best of hosts? But if you bring him not to me, there will be no measure for you with me, nor shall you approach me. They said, We will seek to lure him away from his father, and that will we do. And he said to his young men, Place their merchandise in their baggage, that they might recognize it when they return to their people, that they might return. So obviously he knew that his brothers were materialistic and selfish, and so he put their merchandise back in their baggage, so that they would be greedy and we want to come back again, because they basically got things for free. And when they returned to their father, they said, O our father, forbidden us is the measure. Send thou with us our brother, we will obtain the measure, and we will keep him safe. Said he, Can I trust him to you, save as I trusted his brother to you before? And God is best as custodian, and he is the most merciful of those who show mercy. And when they opened their belongings, they found their merchandise returned to them. They said, O our father, what more can we ask? Here is our merchandise returned to us, and we will get provision for our people and guard our brother, and we will have increase by a camel's measure. That is an easy measure. So obviously, you can see that before, because of the previous episode, his father was reluctant to send Yusuf's brother, but now then when his brother saw, okay, we got free stuff, they pushed their father again and said, we'll keep him safe, so they insisted. Said he, I will not send him with you until you give me a solemn oath before God that you will bring him back to me, save that you be surrounded. And when they had given him their solemn oath, he said, God is guardian over what we say. And he said, O my sons, enter not at one gate, but enter at diverse gates, and I cannot avail you in anything against God. Judgment is only for God. In him do I place my trust, and in him let trust those who would place their trust aright. And when they entered in what manner their father had commanded, it was not to avail them anything against God, save as a desire of Yaqub's soul, which he satisfied. And he was a man of knowledge due to what we taught him, but most men know not. Now, I really find this passage interesting, because what's happening is we have this debate all the time going on with this coronavirus nonsense that people saying, oh, you have to wear a mask because it protects you, and you got to take all these precautions. And you can see clearly that whatever will happen will happen. That's what Yaqub said. He said, enter at diverse gates. So he was taking his precaution, but he said that it will not avail anything against God, and it did not avail anything against God. So I guess I'll leave that up to you to decide where you draw the line, because ultimately everything is in the plan of God, and God's plan cannot be frustrated. Okay, continue in verse 69. And when they entered upon Yusuf, he took his brother unto himself. He said, I am thy brother, so be thou not distressed at what they did. And when he had furnished them with their provision, he put the drinking cup in the baggage of his brother. Then a crier cried, O you of the caravan, you are thieves. Said they, approaching them, What is it that you are missing? They said, We do miss the king's cup, and for him who brings it will be a camel load, and I guarantee it. Said they, By God, you know we came not to work corruption in the land, and we are not thieves. They said, And what is the reward for it, should you be the liars? Said they, The reward for it is that he in whose baggage is it found, he is the reward for it, thus required be the wrongdoers. Basically that, whoever is discovered with the stolen cup, we will seize him. And he began the search with their bags before the bag of his brother. Then he produced it from the bag of his brother. Thus did we plan for Yusuf. He could not have taken his brother within the doctrine of the king, save that God had so willed. We raise in degree whom he will, and over every possessor of knowledge is one knowing. Now, this passage is a very cryptic passage because a lot of commentators have a lot of theories about what this means. Some say that it was Joseph, who placed that king's cup in his brother's bag. And I was inclined to that theory for a long time. But as you can see throughout this narrative, he's a man of trustworthiness. He is a man of patience. And for him to do a trick like this, I find it difficult to believe. But what I do see throughout, when we look at this phrase, and thus did we establish, and thus did we plan for Yusuf, is that this is again the plan of God. So, if you look at the previous pentextuals instances of this وَقَدَالِكَ, and thus you will see that it was not Yusuf doing anything. It was things basically happening to him. So my theory is that when it says, and he put the drinking cup in the baggage of his brother, it's actually talking about one of his brothers, those goons that, they hated him and his brother. They probably, one of those guys put the cup into his brother's baggage, and he figured, if it goes through, it goes through, and if it doesn't go through, then, this guy gets, Yusuf's brother gets caught. And, to me, that's a better interpretation of what's going on. And also the other thing is that they asked the brothers, what should be the consequence if you are liars? What is the consequence if it is discovered that the king's cup is in one of your bags? And they said that the consequence is that in whose bag is the cup, he should be seized. So this is not the king's law. The king's law is probably something else in the case of stealing. But so for Yusuf to plan all that, how would he know that they would respond in this manner and say, okay, yeah, you can seize that person to whom you found the king's cup? Anyway, that's my understanding of it. God knows best. Okay, to continue, verse 77. Said they, if he steals, there already stole a brother of his before. And Yusuf concealed it within his soul and did not reveal it to them. He said, "You are in worst case, and God knows best what you describe." So right off the bat, you see them placing the blame on the brother squarely. Said they, "O governor, he has a father, a very aged man, so take thou one of us in his place. We see thou art among the doers of good." He said, "God forbid that we take him save with whom we found our goods, then should we be the wrongdoers." And when they despaired of him, they separated themselves for private conference. The all eldest of them said, "Know you not that your father took a solemn oath from you before God, and that you failed concerning Yusuf before? And I will not leave the land until my father gives me leave, or God judges in my favor, and he is the best of judges." It seems like the eldest is the only class in this act because he's the one who is actually taking responsibility. So, again, arguments are brought forth that they were trying to say to the governor, leave him be, take one of us in our place. So that's not to say that all of them were evil. Maybe one or two of them were righteous, and you can see the eldest one is righteous now. So maybe, when you read in the Qur'an, you have to take that into account too, that they're not just one body of evil. There's good and bad in them too now. I mean, in the beginning they were all like that, but obviously things have changed now. He's matured. Okay. Return to your father and say, "O our father, thy son stole, and we bear witness only to what we know, and we are not custodians of the unseen. And ask thou of the city in which we were, and the caravan in which we came back, and we speak the truth." He said, "The truth is, your souls have enticed you into a matter, then comely patience. It may be that God will bring them to me all together. He is the knowing, the wise." So this is Yaqub's response. He says that the truth is your souls. So he, again, is placing the blame on them, which, again, is a hint that this is probably their doing. And he turned away from them and said, "O my grief for Yusuf," and his eyes became white from the sorrow he was suppressing. They said, "By God, thou wilt never cease remembering Yusuf until thou be ready to die, or art of those who perish." He said, "I but complain of my distress and grief to God, and I know from God what you know not. O my sons, go and inquire concerning Yusuf and his brother, and despair not of the comfort of God. None despairs of the comfort of God save the people who spurn guidance while claiming virtue." And when they entered upon him, they said, "O governor, affliction has touched us and our family, and we bring paltry merchandise. Fulfill thou for us the measure, and forgive thou us by way of charity. God will reward the charitable." So now these characters, even though their father said, go back and inquire about Yusuf and his brother, what did they do? They're asking for merchandise. They don't really care. Which, it is telling. Their father their father sent them back to inquire about Yusuf and his brother, and despair. And he says, "Don't despair." And when they entered upon Yusuf, they said, "Affliction has touched us, our family, and fulfill thou us for the measure." Um, anyway, he said, "Know you not what you did to Yusuf and his brother when you were in ignorance?" They said, "Is it thou? Thou art Yusuf?" He said, "I am Yusuf, and this is my brother. God has favored us. Whoso is in prudent fear and patient, God suffers not to be lost the reward of the doers of good." So this is the conclusion at the point where basically God instructed Yusuf when he was in the well, that you will inform them about this deed of which they did when they will not be perceiving. I want to go back to that one. Okay. Yeah, this is verse 15. "Thou wilt inform them of this deed of theirs when they perceive not." So this is the sort of we're coming full circle now. All the loose ends of the thread are being basically sorted out. They said, "By God, God has preferred thee over us, and we were those in error." He said, "No blame is upon you this day. God will forgive you, and he is the most merciful of those who show mercy. Go with this my shirt and lay it upon the face of my father. He will come to see, and come to me with your household all together." And when the caravan departed, their father said, "I perceived the scent of Yusuf, had you not thought me weak in mind." They said, "By God, thou art in thine old error." Then when the bearer of glad tidings came, he laid it upon his face, and he could see again. He said I not to you that I know from God what you know not? He's referencing the dream. They said, O our Father, ask thou forgiveness for us for our transgressions. We were those in error. He said, I will ask forgiveness for you of my Lord. He is the forgiving, the merciful. And when they entered upon Yusuf, he took his parents unto himself and said, Enter Misr in safety if God should will. And he raised his parents upon the throne, and they fell down to him in submission. And he said, O my Father, this is the fulfillment of my dream before. My Lord has made it true. And he did good to me when he took me out of the prison and brought you from the desert, after the shaitan had provoked to evil between me and my brethren. My Lord is subtle in what he wills. He is the knowing, the wise. So this is the conclusion of basically his dream. And I wanted to go back to that dream because I wanted to bring your attention to the fact that he said, O my Father, I saw 11 stars, and the sun and the moon, I saw them submitting to me. So the sun and the moon are his parents, and the 11 stars are his brothers. And they are all submitting to him. And this is what happens. And he raised his parents upon the throne, and they fell down to him in submission. And he said, O my Father, this is the fulfillment of my dream before. My Lord has made it true. And I also, as an aside, I would encourage you to read Article 6 of the Qur'an, a Complete Revelation by Brother Sam Gerrans, where he goes into depth about what the word sajada means, and he references these verses because it's a very important. By these verses, you get an idea of what the word sajada means, and I give credit to Brother Gerrans for bringing this insight. Anyway, so okay, and he says also, and he did good to me when he took me out of prison. Okay, that was God's doing. And he brought you from the desert. That was also God's doing. And the shaitan had provoked to evil between me and my brother. And that was shaitan's doing. But through shaitan and his plan, even though he was frustrating God's plan, it didn't make any difference. God's plan still came to pass. Okay, continuing verse 101. My Lord, thou hast given me some dominion, and hast thou taught me some of the interpretation of events, the originator of the heavens and the earth. Thou art my ally in this world and the hereafter. Take thou me as one submitted, and join thou me with the righteous. That is among the reports of the unseen. We instruct thee thereby, and thou wast not present with them after, when they had agreed upon their affair, when they were scheming. So that pretty much concludes my analysis of chapter 12. Obviously, it still goes on a little bit, but this was the story of Yusuf. It has many insights into it, in it, and I would encourage you to read it carefully and see what you come up with. For me, I thank God for giving me this insight and really understanding what this story was about. It's about being patient and um, having fortitude and doing the right thing. And even though the shaitan will do whatever in his power to frustrate you and frustrate God's plan, it will have no effect. God prevails over his matter, and most men know not. Anyway, until next time, peace and blessings be upon you.